Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody in between. Welcome on in to the channel. My name is, of course, the Kexman, and today we are going to be doing a quick review and some feedback on the Hallowfall zone. Before we get into it, I just want to say if you do like this video, then throw us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button because there's going to be plenty more War Within Alpha content coming to the channel. Thank you so much for your support over the past few weeks. It's been absolutely incredible, more than I expected, and it just makes me want to do this even more. Now, as we have done in the previous videos that have been feedback on the Ringing Deeps and Isle of Dawn, this will be separated out into 3 different sections. We will have the zone itself, the quest lines in the zone, and the dungeons. So, without any further ado, let's get into Hallowfall and why I think it could end up being potentially the greatest zone in WoW's history. Now, we'll get this out of the way early. I think, in my opinion, Hallowfall is the greatest zone ever when we take a look at the look of the zone and the feel of the zone. It is spectacular. We can't really talk much about Hallowfall without talking about the giant crystal that dominates this entire zone, shifting from light into void and then back again, which is an absolutely incredible set piece. Whenever it happens in the zone, I stop what I'm doing and I swing my camera around to look at the crystal. It is just mind-blowing that they have been able to include this. And I think one of the devs on Twitter actually said that it was a undertaking from a bunch of the technical team, the design team. They kind of all came together to create this mind-blowing moment. And the first time it happens in the zone, it genuinely does take your breath away. However, it's not just the crystal that makes this one of the best zones, or if not the best zone ever in WoW. It's the verticality of the zone, switching between the rivers that lead into the sea, this almost estuary style area, up into the fantastic town of Mereldar, which honestly probably should have been the main city of the expansion, but we'll see how things play out. You also have these areas that have almost been encroached upon by the forces of Aj-Kahet, these Nerubians, and it's here we actually start our journey in the questline. I'll talk a little bit about that soon, but once again, the zone is just beautiful. You can kind of feel that this is an area the developers really wanted to show off with. I will say that some of the areas kind of do feel a little bit, I don't want to say lackluster, that's probably the wrong term, and I don't want to say empty, but it feels like there could be a little bit more there, specifically kind of up in the northern area of the zone, northwest, maybe slightly more up there, but if that's the only thing that I'm going to say against it, then I think this zone is doing an absolutely incredible job. Not only that, but you do have obviously these areas that are lit up by the crystal, but then you've also got these cavernous areas, slightly darker, they're slightly gloomy, really gets across the aesthetic of the Arathi that are stuck down here, and their aesthetic is absolutely fantastic. The towers, the Lightbringer towers they have, or the Lamplighter towers, absolutely incredible. They look fantastic as centerpieces in these dark zones, and Mereldar as a town is just super cozy, real super cozy vibes. I absolutely love this area, and like I said, I feel like it probably should have been the capital city, but I have a feeling they're saving this area for an allied race zone coming up later. Maybe this will be a starting zone for the Arathi allied race. We'll have to wait and see. It would be the perfect place for it to happen, but yeah, for me, Hallowfall is the greatest zone that Blizzard have ever created in World of Warcraft. But as I've said previously, a zone is only as good as its questline, and if we're going by that, then Hallowfall remains excellent. I may sound like a broken record when I'm talking about these quest lines across both Isle of Dawn, Ringing Deeps, and now Hallowfall, but Blizzard, once again, don't do anything too special. They don't do anything that is wild for a quest line. There's no new quest types inside Hallowfall. However, once again, they do a phenomenal job in being able to convey the Arathi, convey what they are dealing with here in Hallowfall, the struggles they are dealing with, the day-to-day life of the characters, what they believe in, and, spoilers, where they come from. It is very, very heavily hinted at and pretty much confirmed that there is an entire human, well, half-human, half-elf kingdom on the other side of Azeroth. They are following this decree from a glorious emperor. There is an empire across on the other side of the storm wall that we know also exists, which obviously gives us a tidbit for where we may be going after the World Soul Saga, which personally I think could end up being very, very exciting. One thing that I love that Hallowfall does as well is it gives us a brief period of time during this quest line where we effectively get downtime. We can explore the town of Merildar. We buy a round of drinks for Faerun, Anduin, and Illyria. We explore the Arathi that are down here in a deeper way. It gives us time to explore the characters, to explore why they're here, and it's not something you have to do. There's a couple of stay a while and listen areas. It's not something you have to do, but if you're a fan of the lore, if you're a fan of this zone, it is absolutely something you need to take a look at. Also, some of the characters we are introduced to are exceptional. General Steelstrike is a personal favourite of mine. Very much a no-nonsense general who knows exactly what they need to do to get results, but the outstanding character of this zone is Faerun Lothar. The introduction to her, the impact she has on the quest lines for the zone, and not only that, but her relationship with Anduin is interesting, almost kind of taking on a mentor-style role for somebody that has lost the light. The Arathi are all about the light. They are obviously from a empire that heavily worships the light. Everything in their culture almost revolves around the light, which once again means for Anduin, this is a very, very interesting area for him indeed. And it ends interesting in a way that I didn't really expect. So I'm looking forward to see how that's going to play out in the future. As I've said previously, side quests really help flesh a zone out, and Hallowfall is no exception. You have a questline that involves an orphan wreaking havoc on the Kobis in the area in revenge for her parents. I say her, you do all of the work for her, but it's certainly an interesting side quest. She seems a little bit crazy, but at the same time, it's kind of fun to see this small child take agency effectively in what is considered one of the worst things a child can go through in losing both of their parents. There is a questline involving the last mage in all of Hallowfall. The mages previously died when they were effectively teleported down into this cave zone, and his attempts to regain access to the Empire through way of portals. Now, this mage isn't a specialist in portals, so you're kind of helping him out with some water that has drained down from a crash of a certain arcane city above. Spoilers once again for those folks that, you know, if you're watching this alpha video here and you're complaining about spoilers, then I'm slightly confused. But it's once again, it's interesting. It ends slightly differently than you would expect, but it helps flesh out the zone, helps flesh out these people. There is a standard kill and gather quest, but this does lead on to a neat little interaction between the Arathi and the Earthen, who we know did actually have a connection. They were trading, and then stuff started to fall apart for them, and they're reconnecting with the Earthen during this. There is one questline I'm not too sure on, and it does connect in with one of the dungeons, the Priory, and it feels as though there's a couple of steps missing. You go from helping out these brothers, helping one of them grieve after his brother passes away, and then within 2 quests, it's suddenly oh, the Priory is involved, they're using necromancy, and the brother is now on the side of the Priory. It's very, very sudden. I'm not sure if there's any context missing, possibly in the dungeon itself, but that was the only questline that I felt fell short for me, mostly because it seems to be missing some context. I don't know if, again, it's something that's missing from the alpha, or if it's just a questline that kind of wrapped up a little bit too quickly. But for me personally, that was kind of one of the low points of the zone in regards to quests. But again, that is something that can be fixed, and Hallowfall, as I mentioned, the zone is beautiful and perfect. The quest lines are fantastic. They give us a really good understanding of the Arathi people. Now we move on to the dungeons, and this is where Hallowfall might take a few steps down for a couple of people. Now, this alpha build for War Within that featured Hallowfall seems to have been the most unstable of all of the alpha builds that we have had so far, and this definitely showed in the dungeons. We have Priory of the Sacred Flame, which is effectively Scarlet Monastery on steroids, and we have the Dreadwake, which is a pseudo-dragon riding dungeon, or dynamic flying dungeon, as it is now. The first time that we tried Priory of the Sacred Flame, it ended in 5 minutes. The scaling was completely off, bosses were dying in 5 seconds, you couldn't really test it. The Dreadwake was a buggy, disconnecting mess. I was able to do the dungeons at the tail end of the alpha week here, and Priory of the Sacred Flame definitely does live up to the Scarlet Monastery on steroids comparisons. There's a wide open courtyard area to start with. You then move into the actual Priory itself, into the church, and you face off against enemies there. Again, this is the one that had the brother storyline going into it, and it felt very sudden. I'm wondering if, once again, there is a little bit of context missing on the alpha, but very, very quickly it is, oh, now the Priory is evil, and you just end up going into that. I'd like to see that fixed. The dungeon itself, the courtyard area, is a lot of fun. There is a lot of trash there. I could see this, if they do keep fortified, it being an absolute nightmare during that Mythic Plus week. The bosses themselves didn't really do anything super special, except for the final boss that does seem to have 2 very distinct stages. There is a shield you need to break, there's a big channel that's going on. The only problem is, it's a very, very bright area. The floor is kind of a beige color, and you also have a bunch of swirls. You have light swirls that you need to avoid. You have targeting circles that are also the same light color on a player that also leave light zones. There's a lot of confusion as to which ones you need to run away from, which ones you avoid, and even then, it's difficult to see where you can stand that is safe. I'd like to see a couple of changes to that. Maybe switching them to the void so they're a lot easier to see, or maybe have one of the abilities be light, one of the abilities be void, so there's a difference you can see between them. However, outside of that, Priory of the Sacred Flame, a very, very good looking dungeon, has some definite callbacks to, or feeling like it calls back to, Scarlet Monastery. One I think that, with a couple of changes, could be very, very exciting. The Dreadwake also falls into this category of very, very exciting, but definitely requires some changes. The opening to this dungeon is you breaking through the forces of Azj-Kahet as you get onto the aforementioned Dreadwake, fighting off some void enemies on there. There's a couple of issues, I think, with some of the caster mobs doing an ability, I believe it is the shell ability that puts a shield on things, that is got a huge area that pulls other mobs in that you're not currently fighting. That's a bug that probably will be fixed. The first boss is a lot of fun. It involves you having to jump onto your dynamic flying mounts to avoid this huge void AoE that somehow doesn't destroy the Dreadwake ship, which is slightly confusing considering how big the void area is. Outside of that, though, again, this is normal difficulty. It is fairly easy, but again, potential for it to be very exciting when we get into the higher difficulty areas. And speaking of higher difficulty areas, we then have the second boss. The second boss patrols around Mereldar. It's been overtaken by the forces of the Nerubians, the Azj-Kahet, and there are a lot of mobs in this area as well. You're supposed to drag them right down and fight your way through the forces. However, there's a couple of mobs that cause issues. There are dark casters that do a void shell. Now, this is a ability that cannot be interrupted. It has to be stunned, and they will effectively shield every mob in that pack for a substantial amount of HP. The problem is, some of these packs have up to 3 of these dark casters, and they will chain cast this. They don't all cast it at the same time. It's slightly staggered, and if one of them goes off, you then can't stun or interrupt one of the other ones when they cast it, and it just ends up being an absolute mess. We were in a group that wasn't particularly coordinated. It was only a normal dungeon, and we wiped for a fairly long time because of these dark casters. Not only that, you have to kill lieutenants in the zone. The boss patrols around the zone and is empowered by these lieutenants. If you're not paying attention, the boss can just wander up and absolutely destroy you. Not only that, but there are also other mobs that are patrolling around the area. It feels too much. I understand what Blizzard were trying to do, but it feels far, far too much for this area. What I would have liked to have seen is, if they're going to go down the route of, oh, Mereldar has been overtaken by the forces of Ashkahet, we could go one of 2 ways. Firstly, we are on the Dreadwake. Let's use the cannons. Have us firing down into the area of Mereldar to try and take out the Nerubians that are in this area. That would be pretty fun. I could understand them not wanting to do that because they don't want to destroy Mereldar. Well, if that's the case, go down option number 2. One thing that we've seen out of some of the dungeons so far is they've taken abilities from previous bosses. For example, in the Darkflame Cleft dungeon, you have the final boss, the Darkness, will fire a beam towards the candle you need to keep safe. Kind of reminiscent of the siege from Farak. Let's use the dragon riding ability from Mythic Tindral Sage Swift. Let us fly down in our mounts and slam into the mobs that are in this Mereldar area, destroying them. And then we fly back up and then we slam down again. You can have coordinated strikes from dragon riding in Mereldar as a dungeon. I think that would be really, really exciting. Once you do take care of the lieutenants and you get onto the boss, doesn't really, again, do anything too exciting. You then move on to the final boss, which is... First part takes place on the Dreadwake, which again is relatively simple, and then the second part takes place in the funeral area in Hallowfall that you do come across during your questing. In between them, you dragon ride chasing the boss. It was a little bit buggy, but I can see what Blizzard are going to do, and once that bug is kind of cleared up, once that whole area is cleared up with dragon riding, I think it would be a very, very fun boss to play through. It's just at the moment it is slightly wonky, which can make things a little bit difficult trying to test it. All in all, the dungeons that we do see from Hallowfall pretty much fall into the context of they could be excellent, they just have a couple of things that need to be adjusted to make them excellent. Specifically, the Dreadwake. I think the final boss in the Priory needs a little bit of attention. Outside of that, it feels okay. The Dreadwake, however, does need the second area, the second boss, the Mereldar section of that dungeon to be changed in a way that is going to make it quote-unquote fun. At the moment, for me personally, it didn't feel like fun. I feel like it would be a lot more exciting if we were dive bombing with our dragon riding mounts, almost using the power of the light to dive bomb into this zone. Outside of that, though, I'm pretty happy with both of them in regards to the bare bones of the dungeons, and I'm excited to see what happens when we step up to those higher difficulty levels. All in all, Hallowfall is an exceptional zone that is more than likely going to go down in World of Warcraft history as one of the greatest. There are very few zones that elicit such joy when you're dynamic flying through them, that create a feeling of excitement for the future, knowing that we do have this empire that is waiting for us on the other side of Azeroth. a zone that does such an exceptional job at introducing new characters, but also fleshing out existing ones, giving them a storyline to follow. All in all, with the quests, with the zone, I think Hallowfall is 10 out of 10. As it currently stands, the dungeons, they probably sit around about a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. Not because of their design, but more little things that need to be changed here. I think the design of the secondary, as I mentioned, of Dreadwake does need to be changed. If they are able to do that, then there is very, very little to actively complain about this zone. And if this is the level of commitment that we are getting from the design team, from the development team, from the technical team as well, I am so looking forward to what they're going to be doing with not only the War Within, but also with future zones in the expansions Midnight and The Last Titan. What are they going to do with Silvermoon? What are they going to do with Ulduar? This is what we want from these expansions. We want excitement not only for the expansion itself, but for the future of World of Warcraft. And Hallowfall absolutely delivers on that. Next week, we will potentially be seeing Azj-Kahet. As it stands, we've been going through these zones: Isle of Dawn, Ringing Deeps, Hallowfall. Hopefully Azj-Kahet is next. We'll find out what those Nerubians are up to. I'm very, very excited for it, and we will have all of the zones here on the channel. So please, once again, if you did enjoy this video, give us a thumbs up, throw us a subscribe. My name has been the Kexman, and we will dive deeper into the War Within, figuratively and literally.